It was a little past midnight, and Jeremy Fisher was tired. Too tired, really, for the long, lonely drive he was on. His eyelids were growing heavier by the minute, and the faint hum of his sedan's engine, combined with the monotony of the deserted highway, was lulling him dangerously close to sleep. The radio played a soft, forgettable tune, but the crackling static suggested he was far from any major town or city. He needed to stop soon, if not for rest, then at least for some gas to power him through the last leg of his journey. As if on cue, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. Jeremy squinted through the windshield, and as he got closer, the flickering light resolved into the glowing sign of an old, isolated gas station. The neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters burnt out so that it read gas tat on, the words stuttering to life and then dimming again. Jeremy pulled into the gravelly parking lot. The station was small and looked like it had seen better days, probably a relic from a time when this highway wasn't as desolate. A single pump stood at the center, rusted and weathered, and the small convenience store attached to it had a few dim lights on inside. There were no other cars in sight, and the surrounding area was suffocated by the dark, thick woods. Perfect, Jeremy muttered to himself, more in an effort to stay awake than out of any genuine excitement. He parked his car next to the pump and stepped out into the cool night air. The gas pump's handle was sticky as he picked it up, the nozzle creaking as if it hadn't been used in ages. Jeremy glanced toward the convenience store, debating whether he should grab a coffee or just pay and leave. The tiredness that had been gnawing at him all night returned, sharper this time, like a nagging reminder of how long he'd been on the road. As he turned back toward his car, his eyes caught something strange, a flash in the station's window. The glass reflected the dim, yellow light from the store's interior, but there was something off about it. For a split second, Jeremy thought he saw someone standing in the reflection, a woman, her face pale and twisted in terror. She was mouthing something, eyes wide with panic, as if she were begging for help. Jeremy spun around, his heart pounding, expecting to see her standing behind him. But there was no one. The parking lot was empty, the station silent except for the faint hum of the neon sign overhead. He turned back to the window, heart still racing. The reflection was normal again, just the distorted image of his own car and the gas station behind him. He shook his head, trying to dispel the feeling that had crept up his spine, that chill of something being terribly wrong. "You're just tired," he whispered to himself, gripping the pump handle tighter. But as he looked closer at the window, there was again a figure just at the edge of the glass. This time it wasn't the woman. It was a man running, his face smeared with blood. He looked frantic, turning his head as if something were chasing him. And then, right before Jeremy's eyes, the man vanished. 1 second, he was sprinting across the reflection. The next, he was simply gone. Jeremy felt his stomach twist. He stepped closer to the window, almost pressing his face against the glass, hoping, praying that it was just some strange optical illusion. His breath fogged up the window as he squinted to see if there was any logical explanation. But as the mist cleared, the reflection changed again. Now there was a scene of pure carnage. Two people stood in the middle of the gas station, where his car was parked just moments ago. One was the woman he had seen earlier, her clothes torn and stained with dark, wet patches. The other was the man, who lay crumpled on the ground, gasping for air. Something else, something inhuman, was standing over him. It had no distinct shape, just a blur of shadows with elongated limbs, like a predator emerging from the darkest parts of the forest. The woman screamed soundlessly in the reflection, her face contorting as the shadowy figure lunged toward her. Jeremy stumbled back, his hand covering his mouth in disbelief. He spun around to look at the parking lot, but there was nothing, just his car, the gas pump, and the desolate road stretching out into the void of the night. The reflection was showing him something that wasn't there. Or was it? His breathing quickened as he tried to rationalize what he was seeing. It wasn't real. it couldn't be real. His mind was playing tricks on him. Maybe he was more exhausted than he realized. Maybe he was hallucinating. But even as the thoughts formed, the reflection shifted again. This time, it showed Jeremy himself. He stood at the pump, just as he was now, but something was behind him, something that looked like the same shapeless entity from before, its limbs curling and reaching toward him, ready to strike. Jeremy's heart dropped. He whirled around, certain that he would come face to face with whatever it was. But again, there was nothing. The lot remained empty, silent, but the growing sense of dread gnawed at him, making every shadow seem like a lurking menace. The pump clicked, signaling that his tank was full, but Jeremy barely heard it. His hands were shaking as he removed the nozzle and replaced it on the pump. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to get in the car and leave, but something held him in place. Some awful curiosity, some terrible need to understand what was happening. He turned back to the window one last time. This time, the reflection showed him a series of rapid images. People, strangers, were being attacked one after another. A man walking his dog, a woman loading groceries into her car, a truck driver stepping out of his rig. Each one was there for only a moment before they were struck down by the same shadowy figure, their faces frozen in silent screams. And then the reflection showed him something worse. It showed Jeremy, running, bleeding, gasping for air as the figure pursued him. His reflection stumbled and fell, the creature looming over him, its arms stretching impossibly wide, preparing to consume him. Jeremy backed away from the window, his mind screaming at him to run, to get out of there as fast as he could. He fumbled with his keys, nearly dropping them as he scrambled to unlock his car. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely manage to shove the key into the ignition. Just as the engine roared to life, something thudded against the passenger window. Jeremy screamed, jerking his head to the side. A face was pressed against the glass, a woman's face, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth moving soundlessly as if she were begging for help. The woman from the reflection. Jeremy's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. Then, the woman was gone, yanked violently away from the car, as if pulled by some unseen force. Jeremy slammed his foot on the gas, the tires screeching as he sped away from the station, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. For a split second, he saw her again, standing in the middle of the road, her hand outstretched, eyes pleading. But then she vanished, swallowed by the darkness behind him. Jeremy drove faster, the engine whining as he pushed it to its limits. The dark road stretched endlessly before him, and for a while, he thought he had escaped. But as the minutes dragged on, the air in the car grew colder, a suffocating chill that made his breath mist in the cabin. Something was wrong. Jeremy glanced at the rearview mirror, and his blood turned to ice. The shadowy figure from the reflection was sitting in the back seat, its featureless face turned toward him, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just sat there watching him, waiting. Jeremy's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He wanted to scream, wanted to jump out of the car and run, but he couldn't. The shadows seemed to grow, its presence filling the car, pressing down on him like a physical weight. Then, in a voice that was not quite a voice, more like the sound of rustling leaves mixed with distant whispers, it spoke.
You're next.
Jeremy's scream finally broke free as the car swerved violently off the road, crashing through the underbrush. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the reflection in the windshield, the reflection of himself slumped over the wheel, blood dripping from his forehead, and a shadow, now sitting in the driver's seat, grinning without a mouth. And then there was only darkness. When the highway patrol found the wreck the next morning, the car was empty. The doors were locked from the inside, the gas tank full, and the keys still in the ignition. There was no sign of Jeremy Fisher and no footprints leading away from the car. Just the cold, still air of the deserted highway and the faint flickering of the gas station's neon sign, which buzzed weakly in the distance.